Hello and welcome to In Transit. My guest today is an Algerian-Canadian journalist and filmmaker, Nadia Zouaoui, who is associated with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and Al Jazeera Television. Welcome to the show, Nadia.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, Nadia, you made a film called Nadia's Journey. What is the film about? And apparently that was your first film?
Yes, it's my first film that I made 9 years ago. It's a film about the confinement in the patriarchal system. It's a film, I go back to the village I was brought up, where I was born in Algeria. It's a conservative village. And I meet the women of my childhood and the girls I grew up with. And I try to explain that confinement, the mentality that imprisons women in a certain, the patriarchal system, how hard it is to get out of it. Because looking at it from outside, when we're in the Western world, it just looks, doesn't make sense. But once you're inside it, how hard it is to get out of it and how hard it is to change things. So that's mainly the idea of the film.
Right.
It's a film that won a lot of awards. It's a film that caused me lots of criticism within my community, the Algerian community. 9 years ago, it was quite a taboo film. And I'm really happy to see that nowadays it's a film that's very appreciated. I have people who tell me, thank you for putting that first stone of change, because I talk about things that are very, very taboo, It's okay for women to suffer, but they have to suffer in silence. Once they talk about it, it's seen as arrogance and not good women, and so that's what I try to break.
Sounds very familiar to Asian societies.
Exactly.
Also rural India and small urban India.
I showed it in different places for women, in schools, different places, and I was really impressed by how men and women, because I was really impressed by men and women are equally touched by what's happening there, and they relate. Lots of women, they say this is exactly like India.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see that the patriarchal system is the same everywhere. I mean, disregarding the religion or the culture or anything, it's the same. It's how men are supposed to decide everything and rule everything. And I think it's important to talk about these things. So it's a way to identify the root of the problem, and then after start working on it. Because I see in Algeria we have lots of women. Women are very educated now, and I see a change when I made my film 9 years ago. Girls like my age. We didn't go to university. We went to college, but not university. Now I see that all the girls go to university. But what's left now to do is really to initiate the women empowerment, because we have lots of women who are doctors, who are engineers, but they are still very submissive when it comes to being married, and and what comes even with women here. We were talking a lot about women empowerment, how women should be leading their life.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're an Algerian now who's living in Canada. Do you see any difference in the two societies as far as the status of women is concerned? Do you think Canadian society is patriarchal?
No. Canadian society is, I think, equality of men and women. I think Canada is a great country for women. I work there as a journalist. I work for TV, radio. I did documentaries, and I work with men. I have men work for me when I make my films, and I've never sensed that the fact that I'm just a woman.
No discrimination.
No discrimination. Yes, documentary and big reports, TV journalism is like a boys' club still, but I don't have to deal with sexist jokes. Like I worked a little bit in France, so you see these things, but over there it's like not even possible.
So do you find North America more progressive than Europe?
Yes, a lot more. Yes.
Okay, your film is titled Nadia's Journey. So let's sort of travel back on your journey, and come right to the beginning. You were born in Algeria, right? And when did your family migrate to Canada?
Well, my family didn't migrate. Actually, they gave me in marriage at the age of 18 to someone, Algerian person who lived in Canada.
Right.
So these are the kind of the arranged marriage. The man lives abroad, and then when it's time to get married, he goes to bring the...
It's very similar to India.
Like India,
Yes.
like lots of other cultures. And so that's how I ended up in Canada. And then after a while, the marriage didn't go well. So I divorced. And then after my divorce, I brought my whole family to Canada.
Right. It sounds a very similar problem to what Indian brides go through. A lot of them get married in rural India or small town India, and then the man comes back, and when he calls for the bride, she sees a completely different society, and she finds it probably as repressive, if not more repressive, than her own community back home. Did you encounter that? Did you come across a man who, presented himself as a very different person when you came here? You found him very patriarchal, very autocratic. Is that why your marriage broke up? I'm just quoting a very
Yes.
common example of Indian
Yeah.
marriages in Canada.
You know what? I realized that a man who lives in the West, he has the chance to meet lots of women.
Right.
But how come when it's time to marry, they go back to the village to
Absolutely.
bring the virgin girl that
That's
nobody
right.
ever touched? So yes, they are very like macho, patriarchal, because they want to possess the woman.
Right.
Because if they were ready to have a relationship, equal relationship with a woman, then they can just marry a woman from Canada or wherever they live. So it's a problem. But the thing is, they don't realize that women in those countries like India, Algeria, Morocco, they also are changing.
Absolutely.
So they didn't stay the same submissive women that they used to bring and just close at home and have them live the Algerian way and them live the Canadian way.
That's something that I've lived in Canada for 3 years, and I wrote an article which people didn't accept, many years ago, that the first generation of Indians who migrated to Canada have frozen in time. They have left the country at a time when they had certain traditions and a certain way of thinking, which hasn't opened up for them in Canada. Whereas Indian women and Indian society has progressed a lot since then.
Exactly.
And that's the way they treat their children. So the children face a dichotomy. There's a kind of a double standard practiced over there, which probably doesn't exist in India anymore.
That's very interesting because people don't talk about that. But this is something that comes back in all the communities. Even the Italian community, because in the 50s, the Italian community is very important in Quebec. It's the French province in Canada. And I used to have a friend, if she goes out with a man, she has to have a chaperone. And then she tells me that her cousins in Italy, they have boyfriends. But the parents stayed the same old mentality
Yes.
in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
So it's the same thing, like even the Algerian community, that's quite new in Canada, but there's some area that's called the Jean Talon area, where you have 7, 8, 9 cafes lined one next to another, where there are just men. Exactly the same thing that they left in Algeria, they are doing in Canada.
Yeah, they're practicing it there.
They practice. It's not everybody who's like that.
No,
but
not
yes.
everybody, but maybe the first generation. The first generation that went there, that migrated, they seem to be sort of stuck in a time warp.
Yes, the first generation. Yeah.
Right. Now, where all have you shown your film? Where has it been appreciated and where has it been criticized?
Nadia's Journey was a film that was shown everywhere, and it was very appreciated in France, in Canada, and I had lots of awards. But it's the kind of film that you make and you have the West give you the red carpet. And then my last film that I finished in 2012 was the kind of film where the people who used to hate me for Nadia's Journey loved me for my other film, because it's a film about Islamophobia. It's a film, it's called Fear, Anger and Politics. It won even an award in India. It won an award in New York, in Montreal, in a mansion in Baghdad, so it's really international. It's called Fear, Anger and Politics. It's 10 years after 9/11. I went, there was this survey that was made by the ABC News saying that Islamophobia doubled, and I just went to to meet people, and just it's really sad what I found, because there are, you know, just after 9/11, the FBI, and they didn't know how to fight terrorism. So they had this big budget. The city of New York had this big budget to fight terrorism and make sure that there is not another 9/11. But they didn't know how to do it. So there were lots of injustices. And sometimes when they don't find terrorists, they try to create them. So that's the sad part of it. And one of my main characters is a Pakistani woman, Shahina Parveen. They left Pakistan because of the Salafi Islam, because they were how they get Ismaili. So they had to, you know, the Salafi didn't like Ismaili, so they had to run away. And then they end up in the US, and their son is accused of terrorism. But their son is just a 19-year-old, little retarded kid who's very naive. So there were lots of cases like that. So, and some countries in the West, especially the Francophone countries, unfortunately, are not ready to say Islamophobia exists. So that's a film that's disturbed a little bit, but in the same time, it's a film about the human rights. Human rights don't apply just for, you know, feminist, secular women and white people. It applies to everybody. So I had some people, I think the comment that I found the weirdest and the most, that made me think a lot is, oh, we can't believe the director of Nadia's Journey would make Fear, Anger, and Politics. So that's when I started thinking, I disturb because I like to work on the gray zone, because the truth is not just black and white, it's often in the gray zone. And I think that's the work of documentaries,
right,
is really to go and try to do stories where you try to initiate, critical thinking. You make people think differently.
Also, you were not making a film about your native country now, you were making a film about the West.
Yeah.
So I guess
Yeah.
the criticism there was natural as far as they were concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to this after this very short break. Don't go away, we're going in for a short break, as I said, and stay on the other sides of your television sets.